good to see you both. And let's start on the conversation we heard before the break with the new president of the Professional Association of Resident Physicians of Alberta. Kathy, from mounting measles cases to closed emergency rooms, health system undergoing overhaul. What's to be made of how resident physicians feel about the degree of support they're receiving as they enter the system?
Well, I think it's a good question. I mean, obviously, your doctor was being very diplomatic about what he had to say there, saying that they do have the support that they need. But if you look at some of the individual social media accounts of various doctors, they feel under the gun, particularly when you get down to questions like the closing of various emergency departments right across the Yellowhead Highway, for instance. Almost all of those emergency departments have been closed recently overnight. And measles, we've got such a huge situation with measles. I know there's been at least one hospital where they were triaging people in the ambulance bays because of the number of measles cases coming into the emergency. So it's tough, I would think, for a new doctor. I'm hoping that in medical school that they're preparing them for this kind of the kind of flexibility that is required in medical practice now.
Barry, between the role they're playing now as they enter as residents and the road ahead, how vital are these young physicians to the future of healthcare in Alberta, to sticking around?
Well, extremely vital. I mean, let's, the demographic, the aging demographic applies also to the medical profession as well. So we certainly need resident doctors in Alberta, and we certainly need them to have a good experience. And I think that Alberta has an opportunity here to improve those conditions for resident doctors. It was good to see that they had some wins in terms of what their compensation is. But, we're only, I think, fortunate in a way that the rest of Canada is not doing any better when it comes to emergency rooms and medical and healthcare situations as it is, because it's a very high stress job. We know that young people entering professions, particularly in healthcare, are looking for a different lifestyle. And I just don't think we're well planned to deal with that. So I'm hoping people like Dr. Sia can advocate on behalf of that and hopefully change some of the ways we structure and retain very valuable medical professionals in this province.
Kathy, to your point earlier, there are some very high-profile doctors in our province speaking out publicly about the state of healthcare, how it's being run. Where do you think navigating political dynamics should land on the radar of resident physicians?
Well, that's a really good question. You would think that actually providing care for their patients obviously has to be very, very much their first priority. There always is a cohort in any group of doctors who do get interested in the policy side of medical administration and what to make better. And I thought Dr. Sia, one of the things that he said was very interesting was how they're going to have to take a serious look at how to deal with after hours and weekend caregiving and how that looks. I think that's one area particularly that a resident doctor, and they're the ones where that load really falls, can take a good look and help with policy development through their association.
All right, for us, next up, the cost of severance payouts at Alberta's Public Investment Fund, $7.9 million worth last year. AIMCo paid Chief Investment Officer Marlene Puffer nearly $6 million in wages and benefits last September. Puffer had been there for about 20 months. Weeks later, the CEO and the entire board were fired. Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper has since been named board chair. AIMCo manages $180 billion in pension money for public employees in Alberta. The report on severance pay came in its annual report released in late June. Barry, headlines for coverage of this story put severance costs jumping 383%. Should Albertans put it down as to the price of doing business through a term of restructuring?
Well, I don't think they should. They shouldn't accept the way this type of activity happened. I don't think the procedure that they use to deal with this issue, whatever actually their end goal is when it comes to AIMCo, it shouldn't be left alone. I think that's a significant cost, but more importantly, and I think one of our breakaway MLAs said it best, it's kind of a poor way to conduct business. It's not transparent. We don't understand why it happened. We don't understand the cost. And then we don't understand why, what the outcome is supposed to be. I mean, I think Mr. Guthrie said that, they blow it up, fire everybody, and then see what pieces are left, and then maybe they can cross the gorge with what's left. It's a poor way to do business, and I think Albertans are paying attention to that. So this type of headline has to be troubling for the UCP.
Kathy, could the same be said for Alberta's healthcare system, given the teardown and overall it has gone through the past several months?
I think so. I think there's some very serious questions to be made on the business acumen of this particular government. I think that this idea of shock and awe in terms of doing restructuring is very, very expensive. And we're seeing just how expensive it can be. And it's often not borne out by either the problem before or the results afterwards. So we're not really seeing that, shuffling the deck is making that much of a difference. There just seems to be some enduring chaos that continues. In the case of AIMCo, for instance, their results for their actual yield on their investments for last year weren't all that horrifically bad. They didn't meet their benchmark, but they did a bit better than a couple of similar big pension funds like the Ontario Teachers. And so this idea that somehow that they were failing and that they're super expensive and all the rest of it, you wouldn't think you'd have to do quite such a wholesale teardown as what's occurred here. And again, it seems to be the way that they want to do business, but it's taxpayers' money in the end that's at risk.
And Barry, to pick up on your point about the politics involved, how do you see the AIMCo severance reflecting on the Smith government? Does it land on the radar of Albertans?
Well, yeah, I think Kathy said it really well, too. It's like, I think the UCP was elected to a degree, and I think the NDP lost the last election to a degree because they thought they would better be stewards of economy, better business people, more in tune to what the dollars and cents of being government. And a lot of what's happened isn't really resulting in that, whether it's buying children's Tylenol for tens of millions of dollars, this AIMCo severance with very little tangible change in terms of results, whether it's spending money on policing when there's a lot of other priorities, and when you look at things like the restructuring of healthcare, which really hasn't resulted in any tangible benefits 2 years later. So I think they are being judged by that because people are finally, I think, asking the questions to a degree. Well, that's dollars and cents to me. That kind of makes sense. Why would you fire everybody when they were doing not bad? Maybe there had to be corrections. That's how I would do it. So I think that is going to be a question. And it's one of the strengths that the UCP had going into the last election. And they could very well be giving it away going into the next one.
Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is busy campaigning in our province.
Let's build alliances with Saskatchewanians and Newfoundlanders and Labradorians who want to develop their oil and gas and aren't interested in having anyone in Ottawa cap how much they can produce.
Pierre Poilievre addressing party supporters in Calgary over the weekend. He began by thanking Damien Kerr, who stepped down from his Battle River Crowfoot seat in the wake of the federal election, paving the way for the party leader to run in an August 18th by-election. Kathy, if you were to compare participation in last year's Stampede to participation in this year's, how different a political dynamic do you think it might be for Pierre Poilievre post-election?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a little more on the line now for him. I think that he was on a bit of a glad-handing tour last year, and the Conservatives seemed to be doing well. Everything seemed okay, not so much now, and his popularity has gone down significantly. He's having real problems getting purchased without having that seat in the House. I think he's scrambling for his political career, and that makes the Stampede a very important, even though he's got Alberta in the bag, the Stampede is a big national event, and it's very, very important that he starts forging a new or slightly changed identity out of these kinds of appearances.
Barry, how much do you think the state of current polling hangs over the head of the Conservative leader? Or is campaigning in Alberta an opportunity now to escape that?
Well, I think he's going to win the seat. I don't think that's his worry. I think his worry is January at the convention. And so when you listen to his language, he's speaking as a regional politician again, because with the convention in Calgary, I think he hopes to shore up that leadership vote, because that's the critical vote for Pierre Poilievre. He's going to win the seat. It's just whether he can keep his party in line and whether they want to keep him as leader. And as the polling does not reflect a very positive view of Pierre Poilievre across the country, I think he's in serious trouble in January by not changing his kind of whatever his perception in the public. And I actually don't think he does that across Canada by kind of having a Western Canadian slant only. He's got to appeal to the country in order to change those numbers. And so I think he's in a tough place going into January's vote.
Okay, so Kathy, let's pick up on that. How much of this campaign swing through Stampede is about winning a seat? How much, though, is it about retaining a hold on leadership of the party, given the review Barry mentioned in Calgary in January?
Oh, I think it is more about retaining his hold on the leadership than it is about winning the seat. Don't forget, the seat is not actually in Calgary; it's in Battle River, and I think he retains that seat almost automatically. But also, you retain a seat like that in the smaller centers, going out and being out there in Drumheller and in these smaller towns. And there's a lot of little small towns in that riding, and just showing up. That's where how he's going to retain that seat. Being at the Stampede is a separate thing. The Stampede, as I say, is a national event. And I take Barry's comment here. He can't exclusively be doing things in Alberta, obviously. He's going to have to do these kinds of national events across Canada. He's going to have to find somewhere in Quebec, somewhere in Newfoundland, somewhere in BC to do this same kind of very public event, so that people get a bead on him again if he's going to claw his way back up.
Barry, if it is that the Carney government comes through and puts an oil pipeline on its major projects list, where might that leave Pierre Poilievre?
Well, I think I don't think it matters, actually, to be honest. I think his internal, the party members are going to determine, as Kathy said, throughout the next little period of time, whether he can win the country. And having lost an election, when you lose an election, it becomes that much harder to kind of prove yourself that you can do it. And certainly a pipeline, any success that Carney has is certainly going to not help Pierre Poilievre. But at the end of the day, he has to really determine whether he can find the support to hold on to January, and then he's got to decide strategically, I think, whether he can change the conversation so that he can change those numbers and be a competitor for the position of Prime Minister, because today, right now, as we've seen the numbers, he just is not, and that is certainly going to weigh heavily on people who are voting to approve his leadership or not.
And Kathy, if we put a bit more of an Alberta focus on it, with so much talk about separatist sentiment in the province, how much of a tightrope does Pierre Poilievre have to walk in navigating that dialogue here at home?
Oh, he absolutely has to have a very careful balance beam performance here on this, because talking too much separation or even a nod to separation is going to do him some damage all across Canada. And so he really has got to be careful what he says. But he is running in a very conservative riding. And so he has to sort of be very, very careful that he doesn't say something in the riding that he doesn't expect to be repeated across Canada. We're past that point where you can say something at a small meeting in a small town and it won't be reported elsewhere. So yeah, he's got to really, really be careful here, and he's got to watch himself from another perspective too. The one other really interesting candidate out there in Battle River, Crowfoot, is not a separatist either. It's an independent candidate named Bonnie Critchley, and she has come out as being anti-separatist. And so he doesn't, I don't think he wants to start veering off that edge.
Okay. I'm afraid we're out of time. We have to leave it there. Good to see you both. Thank you kindly.
Thank you.